of we'll be taking this first unit of this particular course, Bhakti Shastri course. The first unit is first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. So certainly I am not qualified to speak on such an exalted subject. Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic literatures. So I feel myself very, very disqualified. So I sincerely beg for the blessings of Lord Shri Krishna, Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Shri Gaurmita, Shri Balaji Bhagwan. Also, all our Parampara Acharyas, especially Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajaka Acharya, Krishnottar Shri Srimad Abhay Charanaram Datta Swami Shri Prabhupada, and also my beloved spiritual master. So with their blessings, I have some hope that I can try to discuss on this exalted subject. So you all had a introduction session by His Grace Vangshodhan Prabhu and subsequent some kind of overview also by His Grace Sakshi Chitru. So we'll be beginning with the Bhagavad Gita today. So let us recite prayers first. Om Adhyanatimiraandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruhum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitascha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Krupa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gauravaktivrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada says in one place that our whole ISKCON movement, Krishna consciousness movement, is based on this Bhagavad Gita. So Srila Vishwacharya Thakur, he compares Bhagavad Gita to be like a jewel box. So Bhagavad Gita is the crown jewel of all knowledge. Amongst all the Vedic literatures, Bhagavad Gita is like crown jewel. And Bhagavad Gita is like a jewel box. So the Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 portions. First, so we all know that Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters and 700 verses. So The whole Bhagavad Gita is compared to be a beautiful golden box containing a very, very precious jewel. So first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita uh, are delineating more about Karma Yoga, which is considered to be like a lower covering of the box. The last section of last 6 chapters means from 12 to 18, basically 13 to 18, 13 to 18 chapter, they deal about Jnana Yoga, and middle 6 chapters, that is from 7 to 12, they talk about directly Bhakti Yoga. So, as in this analogy given by Srila Vishwanath Thakur, the Bhagavad Gita, the first 6 chapters, Karma Yoga section is considered to be the lower portion of the box, the golden box. The last 6 chapters are considered to be like the diamond studded, the lid or the top portion of the box. And the middle 6 chapters, which deal with Bhakti Yoga directly, they are considered to be like the most precious, very, very valuable, very beautiful, the gem, which is the essence of everything. So that's how this entire Bhagavad Gita is like a beautiful jewel box with the most valuable treasure inside it. So this Bhakti, Vishwanath Thakur says that it brings Krishna, Lord Krishna, directly under his control. Then further, he says that what is the meaning of yoga? These days, yoga is very, very famous, right? So many people are going for yoga. So he says that yoga means linking one's consciousness with Supreme Lord. So when we are saying Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, whenever the word yoga comes in picture, it is not just merely about the exercises. What goes on in modern times in the name of yoga is what? Simply some physical exercises. But the word yoga means it has the linking with Krishna. It has to have linking with Krishna. So Prabhupada says that in 6th chapter, that linking process, when the linking process is predominantly in fruity activities, it is called Karma Yoga. When it is predominantly empirical, it is called Jnana Yoga. And when it is predominantly devotional relationship with the Supreme Lord, it is called Bhakti Yoga. So when linking process with the Supreme Lord, the linking process of Jiva with the Supreme Lord is in fruity activities, it is called as Karma Yoga. The linking process, when it is predominantly empirical, it is called Jnana Yoga. And when it is in devotion to the Lord, it is called Bhakti Yoga. And Prabhupada says that Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness is the ultimate perfection of all the yogas. So essential message of Bhagavad Gita is Bhakti, devotional service unto the Supreme Lord. So first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, they present how to attain Bhakti by one's work or Karma Yoga. The last 6 chapters describe how to attain Bhakti by the knowledge, that is through Jnana Yoga. And middle 6 chapters directly present Bhakti. So in this way, this fascinating, very amazing study of Bhagavad Gita ultimately concludes at seeking shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna by the process of Bhakti Yoga, which is the essence of life. So in today's our discussion, we are going to talk about preface and introduction. Certainly the introduction is very big, and I don't know in our limited time can we cover it. So for your studies, you need to have every time Bhagavad Gita with you. And if you have Bhagavad Gita now, you may open the preface. You may open the Bhagavad Gita, and we see that Srila Prabhupada, he has dedicated this Bhagavad Gita to Srila Baladev Vidya Bhushan, whose disappearance day was there recently. So why? Because he presented a very beautiful Govinda Bhashya commentary on Vedanta philosophy. Prabhupada has dedicated Bhagavad Gita to Baldev Vidyabhushan. So if we go ahead, in preface, Prabhupada is telling what is the method that he is presenting Bhagavad Gita. So basically, Prabhupada has presented most of his books in this same way. Generally, wherever the verses come into picture, Sanskrit verses, Prabhupada has given a particular style of presentation. And Prabhupada writes in this first paragraph that the system of his presentation is, he first gives the original verse, then there is English transliteration. You must have seen. So there is an original Sanskrit or Bengali verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, is a Bengali verse, but all other books there is a Sanskrit verse which is written more or less in Devanagari or in some places in different languages. And then there is a transliteration. So transliteration means what? The same verse is presented in Roman or English, way, so that for people who are not accustomed to read Devanagari or Sanskrit, they can read in English. Then Prabhupada gives word-to-word Sanskrit to English translation, word-to-word meaning. And then finally he gives the translation, and then he gives the purport. So Prabhupada says that why this way? Because this makes books very authentic and scholarly, and the meaning is self-evident. There is no need of, there is no scope, or there is no chance of any cheating. Everything is very self-evident and very authentic. So in the next paragraph, when Prabhupada is writing the commentaries on this Bhagavad Gita, we know that actually many acharyas have given commentary. Srila Vishwanath Thakur has given commentary, and then which is called as Sarartha Varshini. Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan has given commentary, and many other acharyas also has spoken commentary. So Prabhupada also was very much inclined to give commentary to Bhagavad Gita, because we see that Bhagavad Gita, it is said that Bhagavad Gita contains whatever is there in other Vedic literatures, all that is there in Bhagavad Gita. Plus, Bhagavad Gita has something more. That means what is not there in other Vedic literatures, that is also present in Bhagavad Gita. So that's why Prabhupada was very eager. And we know that at various times he attempted to give Bhagavad Gita, publish Bhagavad Gita, but somehow or other the attempts were not successful. In his Vanaprastha days, he wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, and that commentary was sold away. And then when he went to America, that time also he had, then Prabhupada took to first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He wrote before that one book, Easy Journey to Other Planets. Then he tried to publish first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then as soon as he reached US, he was again trying to publish Bhagavad Gita. But again, his in that Dr. Mishra studio, his original manuscript and whatever he had written, that was stolen away. And again, finally, Prabhupada made an attempt and he published Bhagavad Gita with Macmillan Company. And then finally, it came with our own PPT. So Prabhupada in this particular section, Prabhupada is second paragraph, if you go, Prabhupada is giving the credit of his book as well as his Krishna consciousness movement to Lord Krishna himself. He says that Krishna is the original father of this movement. And he is the one who spoke the teachings to long ago. And in fact, Krishna spoke originally the knowledge of all the Vedic literatures to Lord Brahma. He revealed it within the heart of Brahma. And even directly the Bhagavad Gita was spoken lakhs of years ago by Krishna to sun god Vivaswan. And in this way, through disciplic succession, this knowledge has been coming. So Prabhupada says this movement is actually, Krishna is the founder, original father and founder of the movement. And Prabhupada says, if I have any credit, then he said this credit belongs to his spiritual master, his divine grace, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. So Prabhupada is giving Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada. So Prabhupada is giving all credit to Krishna, Guru and Krishna. So from this we can understand that even though one may take up a very great work or one may accomplish a very great work, we can always understand it is possible, especially in spiritual circles, only due to mercy of Guru and Krishna. So Prabhupada right at the beginning is teaching us this fact that a devotee should always learn to give credit to Guru and Krishna for any of his accomplishment or any of the task he is achieving. So now in the next paragraph, Prabhupada says that what is the purpose of his presentation of Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita present जो Prabhupada ने किया है उसका purpose क्या है? What is the purpose? So Prabhupada says that if you go, this is just 3-4 lines below. Our attempt in presenting Bhagavad Gita as it is to present the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Our business is to present the will of Krishna and not of any mundane speculators. So this is very, very important that when one is presenting the Vedic literatures, this loyalty to the original message is a very, very crucial factor in our presentation. So, yes, we may add some examples, we may add some modern scenarios and all that, but Prabhupada, what he's telling is very, very important aspect that Bhagavad Gita should be presented to present the mission of Krishna, to present the will of Krishna. So, these Vedic literatures have to be studied in a particular mood and particular method, then only they will bring a fruitful result. So, Krishna, this Vedic literature and especially Bhagavad Gita directly, Krishna is want to give particular message. And if one is faithful in understanding what is the will of Krishna, what is the mission of Krishna, what message Krishna actually wants to give to all of us, then when one presents that particular thing, then it will bear the fruit of the Vedic literatures and particularly in Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very important aspect also that we have to keep it in mind that whether while studying or whether while presenting, we have to follow in footsteps of Prabhupada, and our purpose should be always to present the mission of Krishna and the will of Krishna. So in modern times, however, we see further also Prabhupada will say that in introduction that there are 600 to 800 commentaries on Bhagavad Gita are available. So many commentaries are there. But the you can say the honest commentary is very rarely presented, is very rarely available. Why? Because many times people want to present their own things, their own views, their own agendas through Bhagavad Gita. But Srila Prabhupada in the next paragraph, if you go the final lines of the next paragraph, Prabhupada says that Lord Chaitanya clearly says, anyone who tries to understand Bhagavad Gita from a Mayavadi perspective or through speculative methods, it is a big blunder. So one should not speculate on the various verses or the meaning of Bhagavad Gita. It is a big blunder. And what is the result of such blunder? One will be misguided in reading of the Bhagavad Gita. Such a student of Bhagavad Gita will be misguided. He will be bewildered on the path of spiritual guidance, and he will not be able to go back home, back to Godhead. So, in fact, in the further paragraph, Prabhupada says that to interpret Bhagavad Gita without any reference to will of Krishna is the greatest offense. It is the greatest offense. So, unfortunately, we see that in modern times or even in bygone ages, so many philosophers, so many professors, so many politicians, they try to present their own agenda. They did not want to consider anything related to Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. So one place Prabhupada had gone, I believe it was Wardha, where there was Gita Sammelan. And when Prabhupada was invited, so Prabhupada went there, he asked, there is not a single photo of Krishna over there. There was only a lamp, mombatti, candle. And Prabhupada says that even when you hold any political meetings, you always have a photo of a politician. When it comes to Krishna, you don't want Krishna over there. So Prabhupada very strongly spoke that we want to present Bhagavad Gita but without Krishna. One wants to present one's own opinions and there is nothing to do with Krishna. So this type of interpretation is greatest offense. So Prabhupada says in order to save oneself from this offense, one has to understand Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's how from understanding the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Supreme Authority, His words are the Supreme Authority as well. His words are the Supreme Authority and one cannot interfere with the words of the Supreme Lord. So further, Prabhupada tells, if you go down a little bit in further points, the last paragraphs of the preface, Prabhupada says that what is the central point of Bhagavad Gita? The central point of Bhagavad Gita is that the people in this world, they are trying to be happy by sense gratification in different ways. But this is a grand illusion. Sense gratification cannot make one happy. So instead of trying to satisfy personal senses, one should try to serve the Supreme Lord, satisfy the senses of Supreme Lord. And that will bring highest perfection to the person. So this is the central point. Prabhupada says the Lord wants it and he demands it. Lord wants this and he demands this. What he demands, that all the senses should be engaged in the master of the senses, that is Rishikesh. That will bring happiness, not trying to gratify one's own senses for one's own enjoyment. And Prabhupada says this is the central point of Bhagavad Gita. And at the end of the preface, Prabhupada says, therefore, we hope that people will derive the greatest benefit by studying Bhagavad Gita as it is. We have presented it here. And if even one man becomes pure devotee of the Lord, we shall consider our attempt a success. So here, Prabhupada, we can understand the mood and mission of Prabhupada. The mood and mission of Prabhupada was to present the will of Krishna and what result he expected by such study of Vedic literatures, and the process and the organization he has established was that even if one man becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, and in fact, even Srila Bhakti Thakur would also say the same thing. He would say that, even from our all preaching, from our all this Gaudiya Math institution, whatever various activities are doing, if we can make one pure devotee, that will be success. So certainly Prabhupada was more than successful because he made many, many pure devotees through this particular presentation and through this movement. So going ahead, so Prabhupada wrote this in Sydney in 1971, this preface, and we'll go ahead to introduction now. So Prabhupada devotes first page of introduction in offering the prayers and giving the meanings of the prayers. And then Prabhupada further says that Bhagavad Gita is called as Ishopanishad, not Ishopanishad, Gitopanishad. And it is the essence of Vedic knowledge. So there are three types of authorities in the Vedas, that is called as Prasthanatraya. Vedas are basically divided into three types of sources of knowledge, which is called as Prasthanatraya. So there is a Shruti Prasthan, there is Smruti Prasthan, and there is Nyaya Prasthan. These are the three Prasthans which constitute Prasthanatraya, and that is basically this way the Vedas are divided into three parts. Shruti Prasthan are Vedas and Upanishads. Smruti Prasthan is Puranas and Itihasas. and Nyaya Prasthan is Vedanta Sutra. So amazingly, Bhagavad Gita is part of all three. Shruti Prasthan, because it is directly spoken by the Supreme Lord. That's why it is Shruti. Smriti, why? Because it is the part of Mahabharata, which is a Smriti, which is a Itihas, isn't it? Purana and Itihas is a Smriti. And Bhagavad Gita being contained in Mahabharata, so that's why it is Smriti. And Bhagavad Gita is also Nyaya. Why? Because Krishna presents the philosophy in a very sound logical basis. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is the part of Shruti, Smriti, and Nyaya Prasthan, all three. And amazingly, that's why Bhagavad Gita is considered to be the essence of all the Vedic literatures. In introduction, Prabhupada continues the theme. Prabhupada continues the theme which he started in the preface, in introduction again. He says how Bhagavad Gita should be accepted. If you see that same paragraph where Prabhupada says that Gita is also called Gitopanishad, in the same paragraph, the last line, Prabhupada says how Bhagavad Gita should be accepted. So Bhagavad Gita should not be accepted by expressing one's own opinions without touching the spirit. It should be accepted by understanding what is the will of the Lord, what is the spirit of Bhagavad Gita. And what is the spirit of Bhagavad Gita? It is mentioned in Gita itself. The author knows the best what he wants to give, what he wants to present. So analogy Prabhupada gives is that just like we have to take some medicine, so that medicine always has to be taken as per the prescription of the doctor. Medicine cannot be taken by one's own whims, isn't it? If one thinks, oh, these homeopathy medicines are so nice, isn't it? They're so sweet. I'll keep on eating them whole day. Oh, basically these allopathy tablets are very bitter. I don't want to eat them. Or Ayurvedic kadhas are very bitter. So I like this homeopathy. And if one just goes and keeps on eating a lot of, or sometimes cough syrup is there. It is very sweet, isn't it? But one cannot just keep on taking it that way, isn't it? It has to be taken based on the prescription of a doctor. One cannot take it based on one's own whims. Or just because some friend is saying something, one takes it. No, it has to be taken the way doctor is prescribing. Similarly, the Prabhupada says that Bhagavad Gita should be taken or accepted as it is directed by Krishna himself. As it is directed by Krishna himself. It cannot be understood or it cannot be taken just by on one's own whims. Many times people want to say their own things as we are discussing, and that's why Bhagavad Gita, one politician says that Bhagavad Gita is only meant for ahimsa. Another politician says that Bhagavad Gita means it just tells you to do your own karma. So, and in this way, there are so many Bhagavad Gitas are there. But then it is like playing. So Prabhupada is to say, if you want to present your views, write your own book. Why don't you write your own book? Why do you take Bhagavad Gita and put your own opinions in that? Isn't it so ridiculous? Just imagine if you write something and somebody takes it and doesn't care for what you have written, what is the purpose of your writing, and somehow intrudes in that and tries to give his own opinions and agendas. It will be very, very ridiculous, isn't it? So same way, so Prabhupada is to say that if you want to present your own view, you just write your own book. But why you are taking Krishna's book and you want to drive Krishna away from that book and present your own view into it? That is not proper. So what is Krishna's position? Krishna is not one of the authors. Krishna is not one of the politicians. Krishna is not one of the historical personality. He is not just some powerful person or a great person. Krishna is mentioned in every page of Bhagavad Gita as Bhagwan, the supreme personality of Godhead, isn't it? You will see in Bhagavad Gita, you might have read before also, Shri Bhagwan Vacha, isn't it? Why? Because it's supreme personality of Godhead. And it is not that we accept Krishna as Supreme Lord just based on our liking. He is mentioned in very many scriptures as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna himself declares that in Bhagavad Gita also. Krishna himself declares to be Supreme Lord. In many verses he says, Aham sarvasya prabho matta sarvam pravartate. Is it like that? Many verses are there wherein Krishna himself declares as Supreme Lord. And also it is confirmed by many great acharyas like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Shankaracharya even. He also says Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur, and many Nimbarka Swami. So many acharyas confirm that Krishna is Lord. So in this way, Krishna is confirmed as the Supreme Lord, and so he being the Supreme Lord, he is the supreme authority, and that's why his words are most authoritative, and they should be taken as they are. Further, Prabhupada tells that what is the qualification of a student of Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna tells Arjun why he is speaking Bhagavad Gita to him. Why Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjun, that too on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Krishna says this Bhagavad Gita is the supreme secret. It is one of the biggest secrets, one of the biggest mystery. And why he is giving to Arjun? Because Arjun is his devotee and friend. So that means Bhagavad Gita is meant especially for a person who is devotee of the Lord. Clearly Krishna says, Bhakto si me, priyo si me. He says, because you are my devotee, that's why you are very dear to me, and you are my friend, and that's why I am giving this knowledge to you. Actually, originally everybody is devotee of Krishna, isn't it? Everybody has relationship with the Lord, and the only thing that relationship is covered now. Prabhupada further is giving 5 ways. So we all know, right? There's 5 rasas in which everybody is related with the Lord. So, but that relationship is covered now because of coming to this material world. The same relationship, it is evoked by the process of devotional service. So, if we revive that our relationship with the Lord with the process of devotional service, that will make us perfect in our life. So Prabhupada says Bhagavad Gita should be taken in the spirit of devotion. One should not think one is equal to Krishna, nor should one think that Krishna is an ordinary personality or even a great personality. Shri Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. So in the further paragraphs, Prabhupada says that at least theoretically one should accept this fact. So before one studies Bhagavad Gita, one should at least theoretically accept Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and then learn from him. We want to learn from Krishna because he's the supreme authority. He's the most well-wishing friend of every living entity. He's the person who knows what is best for us, and he has given this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita as a great compassion on all of us. So one should understand Bhagavad Gita with a submissive spirit. So Prabhupada says, if you go further, that unless one reads Bhagavad Gita in a submissive spirit, it is very difficult to understand it. Why? Because it is a great mystery. So this is the mood, the spirit of devotion, the spirit of submissiveness, understanding Krishna to be the supreme personality of Godhead. With this particular consciousness, one should study Bhagavad Gita. That person can understand Bhagavad Gita well. The next paragraph, Prabhupada says, what is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita? The purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to deliver mankind from the nations of material existence. Every person in this material world is perplexed because of ignorance. He is put into this ocean of material existence, and he is perplexed and in difficulty in various ways. Arjuna was also in difficulty. Arjuna was also suffering practically. If we go ahead, we'll see how the situation had become. He says that how the Gandiva bow was slipping and his mouth was drying up. So we see these are the symptoms. His body was shivering. These are the symptoms when we are in great anxiety and difficulty, isn't it? You know, all of you experienced it, that when we are in difficulty sometimes, or some kind of fear, some kind of bewilderment, we experience these symptoms. Sometimes, particularly, if I had to address a very big audience in the college or something, This type of symptoms manifest. Or so you all know the stage fear and all. Sometimes some people when they have to go for giving exams, it is very, very bewildering, or very big anxiety is there. So Arjun was also in such anxiety and distress situation. And we see uh, even every person in this world, more or less, at some point of time or other, he faces such kind of difficulty. So what Arjun did when he was in difficulty, he did the ideal thing. He did the best thing. What he did, he turned to Krishna and he surrendered to Krishna. And he said, Krishna, you please tell me now what I should do. You please enlighten me so that I can come out of this illusion, so that I can come out of this very, very distressed situation. And in this way, because Arjun surrendered to Krishna and he took the guidance of Krishna, he could come out of his difficulties. So Prabhupada says, this is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita, that, it is meant to bring us out of the miseries of material existence. It is meant to deliver us from the nescience of material existence, the suffering condition which every person undergoes in material existence. And that is the duty of every human being. Further purport Prabhupada says, it is called as Brahma Jidnyasa. A symptom of human being is what? He should inquire. I don't want to suffer. Why still I am suffering? Sanatana Goswami, when he approached Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says that, what Sanatana Goswami says to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He says that, Ke ami, keman amar, jare tapatre. So, I don't know who am I. I want to know who am I. And why am I suffering? Nobody wants suffering in this world. But why should I suffer? So if when one starts making such inquiries, that is called as, Brahma Jidnyasa. So Prabhupada says every activity of human being is to be considered a failure unless he inquires about the nature of the absolute. Where from I have come? Why am I suffering? What is the goal of life? These are the proper questions, to be asked by the student of Bhagavad Gita, and one who has such a questions, Prabhupada says, so they are the proper students for understanding Bhagavad Gita. Of course, we may think that we already have answers for this, Prabhu. Isn't it? Yeah, but of course, we know the answers of many of these questions, but we have to realize them, isn't it? We have to realize it. It is not just a question of knowing. We have to realize, we have to implement, and we have to make it the very, we have to imbibe it into our consciousness. And that's why, these questions are very vital. So Prabhupada says, those who have such questions, they are proper students of Bhagavad Gita. And a sincere student also should have firm respect for Krishna, Supreme Lord Krishna. And actually speaking, this Bhagavad Gita, or it may be Bhagavatam, both cases, both of these literatures, they appeared from a kind of bewilderment, isn't it? In Bhagavatam also we see that Parikshit Maharaj, he got little bit carried away because of his thirst. And then what he did? He put the dead snake on the neck of Shamik Rishi. And that's how subsequently Shringi, his son, cursed him. And then Parikshit Maharaj decided that, oh, now this is the curse. So let me perfect my life. And that's how he inquired from Shukadeva Goswami. And in this way, Bhagavatam came out. Bhagavad Gita also came out like that. Arjun was bewildered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So we'll see that in the first chapter. So in that bewilderment, he surrendered unto Krishna. And he was acting like a mundane materialistic person who is attached to his possessions or positions or relations in this material world. And in this way, he surrendered to Krishna, and then Krishna enlightened him. And in this way, whole Bhagavad Gita came out. So we have to understand, however, that this type of bewilderment of Arjun was a plan of the Lord. Arjun, being the intimate associate of Krishna, can never be bewildered. It is not possible. So Prabhupada writes this. Arjun was above all ignorance, but he was put into ignorance so that he was put into ignorance by Krishna only, so that he can ask the questions on our behalf to Krishna, and so that Krishna can give the message, Krishna can give his instructions for benefit of all of us. So it was arrangement of Krishna. Arjun was actually not bewildered. Arjun is always above ignorance, but it was a will of Krishna. It was a arrangement of Krishna that Arjun acted as if he is bewildered, and then he inquired the essential questions, and Krishna also answered so that all of us can be benefited. Prabhupada says future generations of human beings, can be benefited. So this is a very, very merciful dialogue of Krishna and Arjun. Both of them have mercifully presented this dialogue. Arjun was perfect. So why Krishna has given Bhagavad Gita? For all of us, so that we will be guided in our life, so that we will get a solution for the problems of our life, so that we can perfect our lives. That is the main purpose of Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is not speaking Bhagavad Gita only to Arjun. He is speaking Bhagavad Gita to each one of us. That's why Bhagavad Gita, it's the song of God. And some devotees say it is love song of the Lord. Love song for whom? For his beloved jivas, for his beloved personality. So we are all dear children of Krishna, and he has given this message for our benefit out of his concern and compassion upon us. So Bhagavad Gita was not meant simply for Arjun. It is meant for each of us. It is meant for each one of us. Krishna is speaking Bhagavad Gita to us. He made Arjun as the medium, but he is giving this message to us. Further in introduction. Actually, this introduction is a very big thing. Maybe you all know, right? How this introduction came about. Anybody knows how this introduction of Bhagavad Gita came about? Who can tell? Because till now I have been only speaking. Maybe some of you want to speak something. Who knows how this introduction of Bhagavad Gita came about? Prabhupada has written such a big thing.
I think was it like he was supposed to start a Gita class with this 26th Avenue, and he was speaking, but I think no one came. But he recorded his own voice. Then later devotees printed them and put it as the introduction to Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, that is correct. And Aradhana Prabhu, you would like to say something?
Roji, I had heard one thing even apart, when Prabhupada printed this Macmillan Bhagavad Gita, he was not completely satisfied with that version because it didn't have many of the things, like he had to remove all the word to word meaning and even Sanskrit text because there was some printing restrictions. So when BBT came in 1972, and then in Australia or somewhere Prabhupada was there, so that time he again got opportunity to print Bhagavad Gita as per he wanted, like with all dialectic marks and with Sanskrit text and again word to word meaning and all that. So then during that time he recorded this thing again. In beginning also he mentions something about it.
Yeah, so what Bhimraj Prabhu has told is correct also, that there was this thing. There was a class Prabhupada had organized, but nobody came. And there were 3 hours of lecture Prabhupada gave, and it was recorded, and that became the book Introduction to Bhagavad Gita. So this is what we read as an introduction. It is a separate book also. And then, yes, as Aradhana Prabhu said, that further Prabhupada saw that this Macmillan Bhagavad Gita, they had brought out the abridged version, and Prabhupada was quite unhappy. But eventually, when the demand increased, then Prabhupada published the full Bhagavad Gita with the introduction also into it, in the part of it. Okay, thank you. Thanks to both of you. So that's how, this Bhagavad Gita introduction has come up. So in this further introduction, Prabhupada says that there are 5 subjects Bhagavad Gita is dealing with. So 5 subjects are Ishvara, Prakriti, Jiva, Kala, and Karma. So you all know this already. Ishvara, Prakriti, Jiva, Kala, and Karma. So this entire cosmic manifestation is working under Krishna's direction. Sometimes a child may think that the train is running automatically because he cannot see the driver, or an aeroplane is flying by itself. But a person who is knowledgeable, he understands, no, there has to be a driver. Without a driver, whole train cannot work. The entire big train may be there, lying in the railway line for thousands of years. It cannot budge an inch, with all its, complete arrangements for all power and all that, except only unless and until a person drives it. Similarly, aeroplane may be filled with fuel. It may be perfectly in working condition. Unless and until a particular driver enters, he cannot fly. Similarly, this material world, it may be going on as if automatically. It may appear that the sun is rising, moon is rising, the days are going, the seasons are changing. So many things are happening in this world. Crops are giving grains, the flowers are budding. So things are happening more or less automatically. But this entire cosmic manifestation is like a machine, and no machine can function without Supreme Lord in it. So that's why Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, is the pivotal personality without whom nothing can work. So in the second canto of Bhagavatam, we also understand that this entire cosmic manifestation started with glance of Mahavishnu on the Prakriti. And even though all different entities were present, even the Devatas were present, the Devatas, the sense Devatas and all were present. Every arrangement was present. Still the universe was not functioning. Only when the Supreme Lord entered into the universe in the form of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, then only the universe started functioning. So that's how Ishvara, Supreme Lord, is the pivotal point of entire cosmic manifestation. It's the main important personality. Without Ishvara, nothing can work, and nobody can work that way also. So that is the first subject also, Ishvara. What is Jiva? So Jiva is the particle of part and parcel of Ishvara. So just like the part of gold is also gold, but the quantity of gold in gold mine and in the little particle of gold is not the same. Same way, living entity are Jiva are part and parcel of Supreme Lord, Supreme Controller Ishwar or Bhagwan. And that's why every living entity, they are conscious and they have the qualities of the Lord in minute quantity. They are also spiritual. Krishna is spiritual. The Supreme Lord is completely spiritual by nature. And living entities are also spiritual, but they are minute. They are like particles. And what is this material nature? This material nature is one of the energies of the Lord. So it is the inferior energies of the Lord. So Prabhupada said, just like the activities of wife are controlled by the husband, similarly, Prakriti is always under the control of Supreme Lord. Prakriti is female and she is controlled by the Supreme Male, Purusha, that is Ishvara, Supreme Lord. Of course, I don't know whether this example applies these days or not. Whether activities of wife are controlled by husband or not. Maybe all of you can tell better to me. But that's the way traditionally things were. So in this way, the female is the Prakriti, which is female. So it is the energy of the Lord and it is always controlled by the Supreme Lord. The Shaktas, they think that Prakriti is above everything. Nature is above everything. Nature is making everything function, but the nature cannot act on itself. There is a Supreme Lord who controls the nature. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says also about it. And what is this nature? It is constituted by three qualities, three modes of material nature. That is goodness, passion, and ignorance. And above these three modes, there is a Kala. Kala is an eternal time. So when there is a combination of this Prakriti consisting of three modes and Kala, then whole cosmic manifestation takes place under the guidance of Supreme Lord Ishvara. And then under the purview of Ishvara, Kala, and Prakriti, living entities perform various activities. that is called as karma. So, the various activities a living entity performs under the purview of these three is called as karma. And what is the result of this karma? Enjoyment or suffering. Based on what karma one performs, a living entity enjoys or suffers. So amongst these five, four are eternal. Ishvara is eternal. Prakriti is also eternal. Although the manifestations of Prakriti are temporary, we see that sometimes in the rainy season, a lot of greenery comes out. But now in summer season, it dries up. So one may say how Prakriti is eternal. Yeah, the manifestation of Prakriti sometimes are there, sometimes are not there. But Prakriti in itself is always eternal. So Ishvara is eternal, Prakriti is eternal, Kala is eternal, and Jiva, all are eternal. These four are eternal. The only fifth factor, karma, it is not eternal. Because the karma is changeable, although it may be old, but one can change the result of karma, and based on one's knowledge, one can destroy one's karma also, and one can become free from karma also. So karma is not the eternal factor. So Krishna also speaks in Bhagavad Gita about these two, that there are two types of this thing. There is a para prakriti and apara prakriti. So jivas are also prakriti of the Lord, but it is para prakriti. Para means transcendental. It is a superior energy of the Lord because it is conscious. So there is a internal energy of the Lord, which is headed by Srimati Radharani, and there is a living entities. So living entities are superior, and there is inferior energy that is called as apara prakriti. It is inferior. Why? Because living entities are conscious, whereas apara prakriti, the material nature, is not conscious, and that's how living entities can exploit material nature. So now somebody, this Prabhupada says that why, further paragraphs Prabhupada is telling why we have to at all listen to Krishna. When we are talking that we have to read Bhagavad Gita as per the will of the Lord, we have to understand what Krishna wants to teach, why there is so much emphasis has to be given to Krishna. So we discuss one point. One point is that Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is approved like that. So Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, also he is completely perfect. So that's why the knowledge coming from him is completely perfect. Even though Krishna comes into this material world, his consciousness never gets contaminated by the material world. In fact, material world is controlled by Krishna, so his consciousness is never controlled by material energy. This is one of the biggest blunders Mayavadis do. The Mayavadis think that when Krishna comes to this material world, what he does, he is also covered by Maya. He also has the body made up of Maya, illusion like us. But this is totally inappropriate. Krishna is always transcendental. Even though he comes to this material world, his consciousness is never becomes impure. So that is the reason Krishna, having always perfect personality of Godhead, his knowledge is perfect and absolute. He's never bewildered in his stage, and in this way, he deserves to be the authority, and the knowledge coming from him is perfect. Whereas the living entity, it has got the tendency to be bewildered, and his knowledge gets covered over by the three modes. So Prabhupada says that if Krishna will also be like one of us, if his knowledge was also covered by material energy, then why to accept Krishna? What is so special about him? Why to hear from him? In fact, there is no need to read Bhagavad Gita also. If Krishna is such a person who gets contaminated in material world. So one cannot say, you see, there is one statement around on the 14th page, around Prabhupada says, one cannot say anything about the transcendental world without being free from materially contaminated consciousness. So materially contaminated consciousness is the qualification for giving the message of transcendental subject matter. And Krishna is the supreme in this regard. He is supremely perfect. He is never contaminated. So further, Now Prabhupada is giving lot of definitions. So first is that Prabhupada is giving definition of bhakti. So Prabhupada says, what is the definition of bhakti? Our activities, when they are purified, they are called as bhakti. Basically, bhakti is the activities of person in purified consciousness. So a pure devotee, he may appear to be not much different from an ordinary person. He may look like any other person of this world, but his consciousness is pure, and that's why whatever he does is called as bhakti. Although he may be eating, sleeping, he may be engaged in so many other activities also. He may be walking, he may be printing, he may be speaking, any other thing he may be doing. So an ignorant person, he thinks, oh, what's the difference? हम जो कर रहे हैं ये लोग वही कर रहे हैं. He is also eating also, he is also passing stool. We are also eating, we are also sleeping. Everything he is doing similar only, not much difference. He is also using computer, laptop, mobile, like us only. What's the difference? The difference is the difference in consciousness. So whereas a ignorant person, he always uses all these things for his own personal, sense gratification. A devotee's consciousness is always to speak about Krishna, to serve Krishna, to glorify Krishna. And because of this, everything he does and all his activities, all his thoughts, that is called as bhakti. So bhakti basically are the purified activities. Purified activities are those activities which are done as a service to Krishna. So that's what is bhakti. Now, what do you mean by conditioned soul? A conditioned soul means his consciousness, the soul whose consciousness has been materially contaminated. That is called as the conditioned soul. So it's a very simple definition Prabhupada is giving. Whole thing is based on consciousness. When the consciousness is pure, the activities of a person are pure, they are called as bhakti. When the consciousness is contaminated materially, that such a person is called as a conditioned soul. And then when such false consciousness is exhibited under the impression that I am a product of material nature, that is called as false ego. So this is the third definition. The third definition Prabhupada gives of false ego, that is to have a false consciousness that I am the product of this material world. I belong to this material world, or I am the product of material world. So that is called as false ego. So the main job of a transcendentalist is what? To become free from this material consciousness or bodily conception of life. That is the main business of a transcendentalist, is to become free from this material consciousness, thinking that I am the product of this material world. I am this body, and the things related to this body are mine. So that's a conditioned consciousness. But a transcendentalist is a person who wants to be liberated. He has to understand that I am simply Krishna's servant. So further definition Prabhupada gives purified consciousness. So what is purified consciousness? Means acting according to the instructions of the Lord. So this is called as purified consciousness. When one acts as per the directions of the Lord, that is purified consciousness. Very simple, isn't it? Just follow what Lord says, or just act according to the directions of the Lord. Our consciousness is pure. So Prabhupada has given very simplified definitions. So the living entity, when he understands that actually consciousness means our identity, isn't it? The consciousness means I am. Our existential identity is consciousness. So when one understands that, when one thinks that I am the product of this material nature, I am the controller, I am the creator, that is called as conditioned consciousness or impure consciousness. So Prabhupada said there are two psychic divisions of such material consciousness. What are the two psychic divisions of material consciousness? One is I am the creator. Second is I am the enjoyer. This is the conditioned consciousness. Whereas pure consciousness is what? To understand Krishna is creator and enjoyer. And what I am then? Because consciousness means I am. So what I am then? I am simply a cooperator. I am neither controller, nor creator, nor enjoyer. I am just a cooperator. So I am simply the cooperator to Krishna, who is the original creator and enjoyer. So, and for that, to explain that, Prabhupada used these famous analogies we all know, right? The part of machine is useful only as long as it is also cooperating. It is in the machine and it is also helping the function of overall machine. Otherwise, the part becomes useless. Similarly, the different portions of the body, they are not actually enjoyers. The stomach is the real enjoyer. And different portions of body, when they want to become separate from the body, they become useless. So sometimes we see that in the factories, some mechanical factories, people are working, somebody's finger gets cut. Now that finger has come out of the body, that finger becomes useless. That finger goes into dustbin or it is just thrown away. Of course, some people will preserve it, but it becomes basically useless, right? So same way, the part and parcel, we are the living entities who are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. They have real meaning or real existence when they are cooperators with the Supreme Lord, when they are cooperating with the Supreme Lord. And when they want to be separated from the Supreme Lord, they become like useless. Prabhupada says in one place that living entities, when they become separated from the Supreme Lord, then they become useless, like that. So the real perfection, that's why, of living entity is to become the cooperator, not controller, not enjoyer, not creator, but to become a willing cooperator to the will of the Lord. We have to be willing to cooperate with the will of the Lord. That is the perfection of life. So now, also, it is so much emphasized, Prabhupada always, we see that Prabhupada used to speak about this often. Lord is not formless. He has the supreme form. Absolute truth is not formless. He has the form. If he doesn't have a form, then he would be considered imperfect. So the realization of personal form of the Lord is the highest realization. Of course, he has got other two aspects. There is a localized aspect called Paramatma, and also there is a Brahma Jyoti, which emanates from the Supreme Lord. So that is impersonal aspect of the Lord. But ultimately, Lord is a person. So when Krishna is speaking in Bhagavad Gita, he is a person who is speaking. And he is complete whole. Why? Because Prabhupada says that the complete whole must have everything within our experience and beyond our experience. Otherwise, it cannot be complete. So if Krishna is not a person, that means he is lacking something. That means he cannot be complete. That means he cannot be God. God means, by definition, God means he has to be perfect and complete. If he doesn't have personality, then how can he be perfect and complete? So in this way, Prabhupada takes this opportunity to again clarify that how Krishna is a person, Supreme Lord is a person. And the best way to know the Supreme Lord are through Vedas, who are the perfect source of all knowledge. Why? Because Vedas are all coming from the Supreme Lord, who is perfect. So the every knowledge which is mentioned in the Vedic scriptures is perfect. It has no fallacies. So that's why the Vedic knowledge is called as infallible and complete. There is no lacking. Now, but how to receive this Vedic knowledge? The Vedic knowledge has to be received in a disciplic succession, the disciplic succession of the spiritual masters. So a disciple like Arjun has to hear the knowledge Arjun heard from directly from Krishna, and also the candidate who wants to learn the Vedic knowledge has to hear in a disciplic succession, which comes from Krishna, not any disciplic succession. Because if you go, Mayavadis also have their own disciplic successions, isn't it? Even the Shaivites, they have their own disciplic succession. Everybody can quote their own disciplic succession. Even our college teachers, we can have disciplic succession, right? We have our teacher has his own teacher, isn't it? So disciplic succession is everywhere. So very important aspect of disciplic succession is what? It should be coming from the supreme absolute personality of Godhead Krishna. Then only that disciplic succession is perfect. Otherwise, it is carrying on simply some defective knowledge. So why Krishna's, so that's why first qualification of a disciplic succession is that it should be coming from the Supreme Lord himself. And then when a student receive this knowledge from a disciplic succession, then he gets a perfect knowledge. This knowledge is also called as apaurisheya. Why? Because it is beyond the 4 defects. It is not the knowledge of this material world which is defected, which changes over the period of time. Yes, Pluto was there at one point of time. Now there is no more Pluto. Oh, sorry, again Pluto has come. So it is not this type of knowledge. This is the perfect knowledge which comes from the perfect Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, and then Prabhupada says, how else to receive the Vedic knowledge? Kindly mute yourself. Somebody, there is some sound coming from some devotee. Kindly mute yourself. Yeah. So, now the 2 things Prabhupada is speaking. One thing is that while receiving this knowledge in disciplic succession, one has to accept everything what Krishna says without contradicting him. So Bhagavad Gita should be also accepted without interpretation, without deletion. It's not that I like this portion, so I accept this portion. I don't like that portion, so I don't accept that. So no, not that way. It has to be taken completely. So without interpretation, without deletion, without our own whimsical participation in the matter. So first thing Prabhupada says is that the Vedic knowledge or Bhagavad Gita has to be heard in a disciplic succession only. Now, even when we are hearing it in the disciplic succession, it should be without interpretation, without deletion, without whimsical participation. That is very important. So then one can receive a very pure and perfect knowledge. Also, Bhagavad Gita, what is the destination of a person, one who studies Vedic knowledge in such a manner? If somebody takes Vedic knowledge, especially Bhagavad Gita, in a disciplic succession and understands the will of the Lord, mission of the Lord, and hears it without any deletion, without any interpretation, the destination is he attains the Sanatan sky. The destination is that he attains the eternal spiritual sky. So there is a information about the spiritual world, which is also there in Bhagavad Gita, which is an eternal abode. Whereas this material world is a temporary abode, eternal abode, the spiritual world exists. So this is the eternal residence of living entity. So the abode of the Lord is called as Sanatan sky. The living entity is called as Sanatan Jiva, and his Lord is also himself is a Sanatan Bhagwan. And there is a Sanatan Dham. And there is a occupation, eternal occupation of living entity, that is Sanatan Dharma. So Bhagavad Gita also talks about these 4 Sanatans. One is Sanatan Dham, that is the eternal abode of the living entity, eternal abode of the Supreme Lord. Sanatan Bhagwan, that is Supreme Lord, who is always eternal. Sanatan Jiva, the living entity, is also eternal. And Sanatan Dharma, which is the eternal occupation of living entity, that is to render service unto the Supreme Lord. So the Lord himself is coming and speaking Bhagavad Gita, and he is coming in different incarnations, or he sends his confidential associates, so that he can reclaim the conditioned souls and bring them. He wants to revive their Sanatan Dharma and bring them to the Sanatan Dham. So that is the purpose of the Supreme Lord. So Srila Ramanujacharya, he has explained what is the meaning of word Sanatan. Sanatan means which has neither beginning nor end. So religion is not just some kind of faith. Sometimes people feel dharma means religion, but we see that the faith changes. Sometimes person may become from Hindu to Muslim or Christian. Sometimes Muslim may become Christian. Something like that may happen. But dharma is not just a religion. Dharma is the essential nature of every living entity. And we know what is that essential nature of every living entity? Jivera Swarupa hai, Krishnera Nitya Das. So, Sanatan Dharma, or the essential nature or duty of living entity, of every living entity, is Sanatan Dharma, that is to serve, love and serve Supreme Lord. So that is the cost, that is the dharma, or that is the nature which is constantly with living entity. It cannot be changed. In material world, this tendency to serve manifest in rendering service to various material people. But because of that service to the material world, the living entity undergoes various sufferings. So this particular tendency has to be directed towards its own original nature. The original nature of every living entity is to serve the Supreme Lord. So if one directs this serving propensity towards the Supreme Lord, then what happens? One becomes purified, and in this way one becomes happily situated in the spiritual sky. One becomes happily situated in devotional service with the Supreme Lord. So this is the way of becoming happy. Krishna Prabhupada says that we are created for Lord's enjoyment, and if we participate in that eternal enjoyment with the Supreme Lord, we become happy. We cannot become happy otherwise. It is not possible to become happy independently. So Prabhupada here he is telling the formula for becoming happy is to direct our serving propensity towards the Supreme Lord. And in this way, Krishna, he being the highest pleasure, if we try to serve Krishna, we will also get great pleasure. Our hankering for pleasure will be completely satisfied. And that's why Krishna comes to this material world. So that's why in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advises that one should not try to go to other planets. It is possible to go to other planets by worshipping various demigods who preside over those planets, but still one cannot be fully happy over there. So if one wants eternal happiness, then one has to go to the Supreme Lord, Supreme Abode, where there is no birth, no old age, no disease and death. So, but in order to approach that eternal kingdom, the Sanatan Dham, one has to become free from the bewilderment of the attractions of this material world. Such a person who is situated above the attractions of this material world, who is not bewildered by the attractions of this world, such a person can approach the Supreme Dham. So, how can one attain that destination? Krishna says that one has to remember the form of Krishna when he quits his body. So we know this verse very well. Antakale cha mameva smaran bhuktva kaleva. So Prabhupada is quoting that verse. So when one remembers Krishna while living this body, then one can attain that dham. So, but one cannot suddenly remember Krishna at the time of death. So that's why this entire life is a preparation for remembering Krishna at the time of death. So death is considered to be examination, and life is considered to be like preparation. So when we prepare ourselves nicely, then we'll be able to remember Krishna, and then we will be able to attain that abode of the Lord where we can be eternally happy. So for that, how do we cultivate that particular consciousness? What is the practice? The practice is, Prabhupada says, if you go in the final parts, I'll just take 2-3 minutes more because we'll just complete it. That Prabhupada says that the way to develop that consciousness, the way to prepare for this exam, or way to prepare our life for going to the spiritual world, how do we do that? The preparation is that we have to absorb ourselves in the Vedic literature. So Prabhupada says we are absorbed in many literatures now, but we have to absorb ourselves in the Vedic literature given by Vedavyas. Vedavyas has given these literature so that we will divert our attention towards them, and we have to read these literatures, Vedic literatures, especially Bhagavad Gita, with full absorption, and we more and more we contemplate. So we more and more we contemplate about Bhagavad Gita and the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, absorb ourselves. It helps us to prepare that type of consciousness. And when one prepares that type of spiritual consciousness, one can easily remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. So now, Prabhupada is telling the last point. The last point Prabhupada says that, it is not that one has to remember Krishna only at the time of death. One has to practice remembering Krishna while working within this world, while continuing to work within this world. So Prabhupada says that Krishna does not advise Arjun to simply remember him and give up all his occupation. Lord never suggests anything impractical, Prabhupada says. So one has to work. All of you are doing job, isn't it? Hare Krishna, please mute yourself, Prabhu. Yeah. So one has to remember Krishna while working within this world. So it is not that one has to give up the work, one has to give up one's occupation, one has to give up family. That is not required. One can continue one's functions, one can continue to work in this world, you can do your job, you can do your other activities, at the same time practice remembering Krishna. So, and how do we do that? So that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Kirtaniya Sadahari, try to chant as much as we can, try to chant as much as we can, try to hear the knowledge of Vedic literatures, and also in this way, slowly try to develop the love towards the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada gives the analogy that just like a wife who has got a paramour, a love for some other man, she does her household duties very nicely. At the same time, she will be always thinking of that paramour. Similarly, we are in this material world, so we have to do the duties of this material world. So we should do those duties very, very nicely. We should not give up the duties of this world. We should do those things. At the same time, we should cultivate the remembrance of Krishna. We have to cultivate fondness and attachment to Krishna. So that is possible by engaging our mind in Krishna's service. So that's why these 9 processes of devotional service are given. And primary amongst these 9 processes is hearing and chanting. So Prabhupada says one should try to chant as much as possible, and one should try to hear the message of the Lord, study the Vedic literatures, absorb our consciousness in hearing, and also one should chant as much as one can. And in this way, and of course one can engage in other 9 processes, others remaining 7 processes also. And in this way, there will be practice. So ultimately, abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina, paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan. So one has to do this abhyas. You all know this word abhyas, no? In Marathi also, or Hindi we say, no, abhyas. I don't know whether in Hindi you say, in Marathi or Sanskrit also we say abhyas karo. Abhyas means what? You practice it. So when we practice like this, we practice to hear and chant, and practice to remember Krishna while doing so. What will happen? Eventually, that will become our nature, and eventually we'll develop that consciousness. And in this way, one will get a spiritual body which is fit to associate with the Supreme Lord. So everybody can do it. Nobody is barred. There is no material qualification required for it. One has to simply submissively take to the hearing and studying of Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, absorb ourselves into them, and also one should chant the holy names of the Lord. In this way, mold our activities in such a way we can remember the Lord. And in this way, such a person can perfect his life, make perfect solution for all the problems of life, and one can ascend to the spiritual abode. So this is the sum and substance of Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada is saying this. And at the final, Prabhupada says, Prabhupada is giving what are the glories of Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada is quoting Shankaracharya's Gita Mahatmya. Gita dhyayana shilasya pranayama parasya cha naiva santi hi papani purva janma kritani cha. So he says that if one reads Bhagavad Gita very sincerely with all seriousness, then by the grace of the Lord, reactions of his past misdeeds will not act upon him. So we will be freed from all the reactions of past by just Bhagavad Gita, reading Bhagavad Gita sincerely. Then further Shankaracharya says, of course, only few verses are given. Mala nirmochanam pumsam jalasnanam dine dine sakrut gita amrita snanam sansara malanashanam. So just like one cleans oneself by taking bath in the water, similarly one can cleanse one's consciousness, by taking bath in the sacred Ganges river of Bhagavad Gita. And if one does it even once, the dirt of material life is altogether vanquished. Gita su Gita kartavya kim anyai shastra vistaraihi yas swayam padmanabhasya mukha padma vinisrita. So there is no need to read other Vedic literatures because this is spoken by Supreme Lord directly. So only thing we have to attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. That's what it is not possible to read all Vedic literatures. So just read this one book, Bhagavad Gita. And what will happen? That is sufficient. And then Bharatamrita Sarvaswam Vishnu Vaktrad Vinismrutam Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanmana Vidyate. If one simply once, Gita Gangodakam Pitva. So if one drinks the nectar of Bhagavad Gita, which is the essential nectar of Mahabharata, it one can attain salvation. Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gita Mutam Mahat. This Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Upanishads, just like a cow. The cow Upanishads are considered to be like the cow, and Bhagavad Gita is the milk, which is the essence of the cow. And Krishna is the cowherd boy who is milking the cow, and Arjun is the calf who is drinking that milk, the essence. And all the devotees and learned scholars, pure devotees and learned scholars, they are meant to drink also that nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam, Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva, Eko Mantrastasya Namani Yani, Karmapi Ekam Tasya Devasya Seva. So that's why he says, let there be only one scripture, that is Bhagavad Gita. Let there be only one God, that is Krishna, Devaki Putra. Let there be only one mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And let there be only one work, that is the service to the Supreme Lord. So like that, Gita Mahatmya is being given by Shankaracharya. So we can understand the glory of studying and reading this Bhagavad Gita and how Prabhupada emphasizes it. So today we discuss what is the mood in which Prabhupada is presenting Bhagavad Gita and in what mood Prabhupada wants us to study Bhagavad Gita. That is very much contained in the preface and in the introduction. So I went 10 minutes overhead today, but next time onwards we'll try to finish it on time. So thank you all very much. Further, there is a disciplic succession given. So we see Prabhupada is a 32nd Acharya in the disciplic succession, so which is very, very helpful for all of us. So thank you all very much for your patient listening. So we'll meet next Thursday now, 7 o'clock. So I request you that now we are not going to read each and every part of the purport, because we have to complete our unit in particular number of hours. We will not be able to read each and every purport, each and every word. So what I would recommend, that just like in college, when you study something in the when you study something in the class, you go back and you read the whole thing, then it becomes pakka. Similarly, the request is that whatever we are learning in this Bhakti Shastri course, you please go through it before the next class. Suppose in this week now we are learning some things. Before next week you come, please read that whole portion. It will make your knowledge very, very pakka. So I request all of you that before you come next time, please read preface and introduction thoroughly, because I had taken only a few points. It is not possible to read. Every letter is very important. Every line is very important, but we have time restrictions. So we will not be able to read everything. So please yourself read it, preface and introduction. Next time next Thursday we'll start with the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, I would like to thank Amshu Proji for very nicely explaining preface and introduction about this Bhagavad Gita today. I would like to thank him by loudly chanting 3 times.
Hari
Bol,
Bol,
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Proji, can we take questions, or next session we should take?
I am available, but those devotees who want to carry on, they can carry on. But if somebody has questions, I can answer. But jinko jana hai, because I already taken 10 minutes extra. So if somebody wants to they can leave also and go also. Those who want to go. But does anybody has any question? As such, most of the philosophy we discuss, you all know only. We just revised it. It's all, you are all not new students, you are all seniors. So you know the whole thing quite well.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, bro.
I have one question. Actually, we have discussed about 5 things: Prakriti, Jiva. So you said that 4 things are eternal, but one change is destroyable. But karma also is eternal, but food are the destroyable. Then
No,
how
no,
karma?
karma is never eternal. That's why when one goes to spiritual world, one is free from all karma. When one becomes pure devotee, there is absolutely no karma with him. So karma is not eternal.
But Prabhuji, fruit of karma is not eternal, but there will be karma. It will
No,
be
no,
a
no.
karma, but
Fruit also is temporary. Even karma itself is also temporary. Karma is also not permanent. That's why one can be freed of all the karma by the process of devotional service. There is no karma at all. That's why bhakti is akarma. Akarma means there is no karmic reaction. So one can be free from all karma by devotional service. That's why karma is a temporarily acquired condition of a living entity. For a spirit soul, karma is not there originally. This karma is a temporarily acquired. This karma can be destroyed completely by the process of devotional service. All right. So in chat, Bhimraj is asking, where can we find Arjun in the disciplic line? Just 1 minute, I'll reply this one. Where do we find Arjun in the disciplic line? Arjun is not there in disciplic line because that disciplic line was different. This particular disciplic line is for Kali Yuga. So Arjun, Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjun during Dwapar Yuga, but this is for Kali Yuga. So we will not find here in Arjun like that. Yeah. So it was revived, means that knowledge must have gone on for that time. But especially this particular knowledge what we are receiving, disciplic succession, is for Kali Yuga. So that's why our link with that original thing starts from Madhvacharya, who came in the 12th century, 11th, 12th century he came. So that's how the whole our disciplic succession starts. Okay, Himanshu, you wanted to say something?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, how Prakriti and Kala is eternal?
Yeah, Prakriti is Durga
Kala
Devi.
is there.
And
in
Kal is also
spiritual world.
eternal. Kal is not different than the Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord manifests in the form of eternal time. So time is always present with the Supreme Lord. And Prakriti is also always present. Only thing, it manifests and doesn't manifest. Sometimes she manifests. So Durga Devi doesn't get destroyed ever. Although the whole universe or whole material creation may be destroyed. But the original Prakriti Durga Devi is always eternal. She never gets destroyed. She never changes, she never dies or something like that. So Durga Devi is a personification of material nature. So she's there, always present. And similarly, the time is not different than Krishna. So that is also eternal. It is eternally present. Only thing, the activities of Kala and Prakriti are dormant during dissolution. जब प्रलय होता है, when Mahavishnu is breathing in and everything is destroyed, so that time there is manifestation of Prakriti and the effects of time are not present. But when Mahavishnu again, the whole creation again takes place, again they manifest. So bhutva bhutva praliyate. Again and again creation is made, done and destroyed, but the Prakriti and Kal, they don't get destroyed, they remain as they are. All right.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Then Anadi Govind Prabhu is asking, I had one question. We know that devotional service is for everyone, can be done by Shravanam and Kirtanam. But how a person who is not able to hear and speak can perfect his life? He can read. He can read, isn't it? And of course, all 9 processes of devotional service are perfect. So if one can engage oneself in the senses, one can engage one's senses in the service of the Lord. So hearing and chanting are the primary processes. But if one is not unable to do so due to a physical handicap situation, then one can engage in the service of the Lord. That is possible. Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay, Mitesh Prabhu is saying, to read Bhagavad Gita with submissive nature. What does that submissive nature exactly mean? Submissive nature means, that's what Prabhupada said, that first of all, trying to learn in a disciplic succession. Second is that one should not accept one portion which I like and reject what I don't like. Also, learn it in an honest way. Means what? What the Krishna and Prabhupada in a disciplic succession they have spoken, we should accept them as fact. That's what Prabhupada says also. No? The consciousness of Arjun, what was that? Sarvametam Kritam Manne Yanma Madasi Keshava. Whatever you have spoken, I accept it as the fact. I accept it as a complete truth. So Krishna says, Arjun says this, that I accept whatever you say, Krishna, as the complete fact, and I want to accept it in my life. So that is what is submissiveness, accepting everything what Krishna has given us and understanding that as the supreme knowledge, that's a supreme instruction. So rather than one can ask doubts and questions, that's not a problem, but it should not be done in a challenging spirit. Like when Krishna says, for example, Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. So a submissive spirit means, why should I, if submissive spirit, unsubmissive spirit means, why should I surrender? I'll not surrender. Not like that. But understanding how do I surrender? I am unable to surrender now, but I want to surrender. How should I surrender? That is submissive spirit. One may ask doubt like that. But just challenging all the time, no, I don't accept. Who is Krishna? Why should I accept, Sarva Dharma? That is not possible. That is not practical. That is not a submissive spirit. The submissive spirit means accepting in toto what Krishna says and try to think how can one apply in one's life. Yes, it may take some time to apply. It may take some years to imbibe whole thing, but that doesn't mean that we reject the message only. We reject the instruction only. That is not proper. Then Gaurav Prabhu says how to increase faith. Initially, we had to just study the Vedas. Actually, the faith comes by association with those who have that faith. So we have to associate with the faithful people, those who have that strong faith. With that, the faith develops on the Vedic literatures also. Also, another way we see that Prabhupada, he emphasizes a lot on reason and logic. So Prabhupada uses, that's what helps us to develop strong faith also. Because he knows that, especially the modern students, we are all scientific minded. So we need proper logic and reason for everything. So that's why Prabhupada has presented the entire philosophy through proper logic and reason. Why God exists, why Krishna is Lord. It is not that it is just presented. No, because Krishna, we like Krishna, that's why he's God. So Prabhupada has quoted the proofs that his activities are proof. He has himself declared, other great acharyas declare, and then Vedic literatures declare, his activities also show. So in this way, through proper logic and reason, also we can develop our faith, develops, gradually our faith can develop and can become very solid. So that's a practical way of developing faith, to understand things with proper logic and reason. And when we understand them, and of course, when we associate more and more with great devotees, those who have that faith, then our faith also builds up. So that's a way faith can be developed. So certainly by reading also the faith will develop. The reading Bhagavad Gita itself will develop a faith also, because Krishna views things very lucidly. Okay. Ayan Prabhu says, how Bhagavad Gita fulfills all the criteria of Vedas you mentioned. That I mentioned already, that basically Bhagavad Gita, Shrutis are the words of directly the Supreme Lord, and Bhagavad Gita is also directly the words of Supreme Lord. That's why it's Shruti. Why it is Shruti? Because Puranas are Smruti, Puranas and Itihasas, and Bhagavad Gita is found in Mahabharata, which is a Itihasa. That's why it is Smruti. Why it is Nyaya? Because Krishna speaks everything based on the logic and argument. That's a Nyaya Prasthan. So that's why Bhagavad Gita is Nyaya also. All right. So Shruti because it is words of Krishna directly, Smruti because it is found in Mahabharata, which is Shruti, and because things are presented in proper logic and argumentative manner. So that's how it is also Nyaya. So Prasthanatraya, all Prasthanatraya Bhagavad Gita is part of. Okay. Okay, Prabhus. So we will stop here. Thank you all very much. Okay, Chandrabhushan, who wants to say anything?
Yes, Proji. Proji, like Buddhist, they say that their language of Pali and Prakrit came before Sanskrit, and they do not accept our Bhagavad Gita. That they say that Sanskrit is the new language and Pali is old. So how we can answer them from the Shastra's reference?
No, but how do we know from what they are saying? Because the Vedic literatures were written 5,000 years ago, whereas the Buddhist religion itself has started some 2,500 years ago.
Because Proji, like they see the videos on YouTube and they say that the Pali is the old, and they do not find any like Asoka's pillar are there, so their language is written in Pali. So that reference they say.
See, archaeological fossils and all, this is not the only criteria, because by the effect of time, the whole thing gets destroyed. So just because some archaeological proofs are not found, that doesn't mean that the things were not existing. And even if we want to see archaeologically, we see that the Dwarka is being found now, isn't it? Dwarka is
Yes,
being
Proji.
found. And then recently I heard that in Delhi also, there are some proofs of Mahabharata they are finding also. So the language is minimum 5,000 years, because the Vedic literatures were written minimum 5,000 years. So these are all, many proofs are there, from this. So whereas Buddhist religion started 2,500 years ago. So, and means what is their criteria? I don't know what is their criteria, rejecting that Sanskrit is not the old language. In fact, it is well accepted in many circles that the Sanskrit is the original language, of all languages.
Okay, thank
So
you.
people will keep on debating.
Yes, yes.
There is no this thing end, but unless until they have to come to a common point, the common point is to this accept, the facts. They are there. If one is not ready to accept the facts, what can be done? Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, so
Prabhu, just wanted to mention one point. Actually, I had heard that Sanskrit is not a written language. It is a spoken language. So whatever we write in Sanskrit, that is Devanagari. So in that way also, it is written, it not in Sanskrit, it is in Devanagari. So that is how we can say that like if we speak, then Sanskrit is an older language. So it is not at all written language.
yeah, so that's also a fact that only it was written 5,000 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Because that's why we say minimum 5,000 years ago, because it was written down, Vedas were written down 5,000 years ago. Before that, it was oral reception.
Right.
Then Bhimraj is saying that it is said that Lord Buddha discouraged Sanskrit reading. People to discourage from. Yeah, it may be like that. Actually, we don't want to go so much into it, actually, because ultimately the whole thing is understood from its fruits. So those who are reasonable people, they also will understand that this essentially, even Lord Buddha's teachings and Vedic teachings are in the beginning, they are same only. Essentially, Lord Buddha is also speaking that this material world is a temporary place and we have to go beyond this material world. So that particular part, our Vedic philosophy and Lord Buddha also matches. And ultimately, we know that Lord Buddha is also Lord Vishnu's incarnation only. So he had come to particular purpose to propagate a particular philosophy which was required at that time. Circumstantially, that was required. So, but that's what, somebody who can understand things through proper logic and reason, he can understand these facts, So it's not just about Sanskrit. One has to learn the philosophy and what's the philosophical point and what's the concept. They have to be understood. So even if they are written in Latin or Greek also, what is the problem? If the concepts are right, the right concepts are given, then only the language is not the only criteria to decide what to follow and what not to follow. Yeah, but of course, ultimately we know the glories of Sanskrit language. So one point is that, one may keep on arguing with people who are not interested to listen. Then, but how much it is useful, I don't know. So, but if people can learn through logic and reason, then they will find this particular knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic literatures very, very appealing. Like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Broji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.